Hey guys, tonight we slip into a place where the air is thin, the sky feels too close, and every stone under your feet has seen more centuries than you ever will. You're standing well, trudging actually along the ridges of the high Andes. The light is already fading and the horizon looks as though it's been brushed with streaks of ash and gold. Your lungs complain with every breath because oxygen at this altitude is a stingy host. You probably won't survive this without help, at least not without some very specific green leaves the locals know well. But don't panic just yet, we're here to wander, not to keel over. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun seeing who else is drifting off around the world together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Andes don't just rise, they dominate. They cut through South America like a serrated knife, their spines lifting clouds, scattering rivers, and shaping the way entire civilizations live. You can almost feel their weight pressing down on history, holding secrets in valleys and mountain hollows. Tonight you aren't just visiting a mountain range, you're walking into a pharmacy older than empires, a cabinet of herbs and roots that were once guarded as fiercely as gold. Imagine yourself stepping onto a trail that once carried messengers of the Inca, swift-footed runners who ferried not only news, but also bundles of dried plants. Those runners weren't just athletes, they were couriers of life-saving remedies. They carried what kings needed when fevers struck, what soldiers chewed when they had to march across dizzying cliffs, what mothers sipped when childbirth clawed at them. The air up here is thinner than paper. It feels like you're breathing through a straw, and every step feels like you've strapped a boulder to your back. That's where plants come in, plants that don't just grow but cling. They sprout between rocks, curl around slopes, and absorb sunlight that would peel the skin off your face if you stood here too long. You begin to notice them tucked along the path, tufts of green patches of moss, little flowers that look too delicate to withstand frost but somehow survive nights colder than your freezer. One mainstream historical fact you carry with you: the Inca Empire was not only built on stone and gold, but on knowledge of these plants. Chroniclers from Spain, wide-eyed and often wheezing, wrote about the strange remedies locals used to fight altitude, sickness, infections, and exhaustion. Without them, even hardened soldiers would crumble under the Andes' weight. Then there's the quirky side. Some of those remedies sound like they were plucked straight from a fantasy novel. Did you know one popular blend used crocodile dung mixed with herbs as a kind of sunscreen? Historians still argue whether that actually worked, or if it was just wishful thinking smeared across someone's skin. Either way, you're suddenly grateful for your SPF 50 lotion. The path narrows and you realize you're walking where countless feet have worn grooves in the rock. The silence up here isn't really silent. It's filled with the whistle of wind, the occasional cry of a condor circling overhead, and your own heart thudding like a drum. As dusk deepens, a small village appears below mud walls, thatched roofs, smoke spiraling lazily from cooking fires. You descend slowly, feeling the shift in temperature as night clamps down harder. Children glance at you curiously while elders sit near doorways, their hands busy weaving cloth or grinding herbs. You're aware that in this world plants aren't just medicine. They're woven into ritual, story, and survival. Every leaf carries a history. Every root has a role. Some are brewed into teas to settle the stomach after too much maize beer, others burned to chase away spirits believed to hover near the sick. You feel the tug of both science and superstition here, intertwined so tightly it's hard to separate one from the other. The fire crackles and you're handed a small pouch inside, leaves curled and dried like paper. Someone gestures for you to chew. The taste is bitter sharp, a little numbing on your tongue. Already, you feel your head clear slightly, lungs easing. Welcome to the doorway of Andean medicine, where the line between everyday life and ritual healing doesn't exist. It's the same thread woven through everything. And as the stars above sharpen into icy pinpricks, you realize you've only just begun to explore the pharmacy of the Andes. Ahead lies a tapestry of roots, resins, and whispers, each waiting to tell its story. The pouch of leaves still lingers on your tongue, and with it, the faint numbness that tells you the Andean way of healing is less about comfort and more about survival. As the firelight flickers against the mud walls, you begin to notice figures moving with quiet confidence. Villagers who aren't just tending homes but guarding knowledge passed down like treasure. You see one man approach with a woven sling full of herbs, the stems bundled in neat groups tied with fibers from agave. His hands are dark with earth, and when he sits, children gather around as if he were a storyteller. Only instead of fairy tales, he tells of leaves, roots, and seeds. You're watching the Quechua healers at work, the keepers of a pharmacopoeia no European book had captured before the conquistadors arrived. These healers aren't robed doctors with gleaming instruments. They are barefoot, sun-creased, moving with the rhythm of seasons. A woman crushes leaves against a stone, murmuring words that you can't translate, but that sound as old as the mountains. She mixes the paste with a little water, applies it to the chest of a coughing child. No thermometer, no stethoscope, just generations of trial and error refined into instinct. And here's a fact you might tuck away. The Inca had no written language in the European sense. Instead, their knowledge often lived in memory song and practice. That means every remedy you witness was preserved by voice and hand, not by ink. A risky way to store medicine, yet somehow it survived through wars, through plagues, through missionaries who tried to erase it. What makes it fascinating and slightly hilarious is how casually some of these remedies were integrated into daily life. You imagine someone in a modern pharmacy asking for cough medicine, and the pharmacist replying, "Sure, but first spit on these leaves and chant to the mountain." Odd to us, ordinary to them. Historians still argue whether these rituals had measurable medical impact or whether the belief itself, what today we'd call the placebo effect, was the hidden cure. The debate continues, but you, sitting by this fire, feel the power of community belief. It's less about one person versus a sickness, and more about an entire village facing it together. The healer you've been watching now sets aside herbs and lifts a small gourd rattle, shaking it softly over the child's head. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, almost lulling you into sleep. But then he returns to the plants, preparing teas and poultices, demonstrating that ritual and remedy walk hand in hand. What you don't see but can almost imagine are the networks of these healers. They didn't work in isolation. Caravans of llamas carried herbs from valley to valley. Coca leaves from the eastern slopes traveled west. Rare roots from higher peaks trickled down to markets in Cusco. The empire thrived not just on potatoes and maize, but on this living web of medicine. And then comes a curious tidbit. Some Spanish chroniclers described seeing herbs used not only for healing humans, but also for treating llamas, the furry engines of Andean transport. Imagine a healer muttering over a wheezing llama, rubbing its chest with the same care you'd give a child. You can't help but smile. Pet medicine 5 centuries ago. The more you sit here, the more you sense that every gesture, grinding, boiling, chanting isn't just about plants. It's about maintaining balance with the mountains themselves. In Andean thought, illness wasn't merely a broken body. It was a sign of disharmony between people and their environment. Heal the person, yes, but also appease the spirits of the mountain, the river, the wind. Otherwise the sickness might return. The night deepens and you watch as bundles of herbs are hung from rafters, drying in smoky air. You catch faint whiffs, sharp mint, resinous bark, earthy roots. The hut is less a home than a living pharmacy. You can almost imagine someone stumbling in with altitude sickness and being met with a full-body sensory treatment, smoke chants, bitter brews, warmth from the fire. One elder looks at you, eyes crinkled, and presses a small amulet into your hand. Inside are dried leaves, a pinch of soil, a tiny carved stone. It isn't just protection. It's a reminder that here medicine doesn't stop when the fever breaks. It travels with you, tucked against your chest, a charm, linking you to the plants and the people who trust them. Outside the stars stretch endless. You realize you've stepped into a world where knowledge is fragile but enduring, where every healer is a library without shelves. And tomorrow you'll taste one of their most famous secrets, the green leaf that built and sustained empires. The next morning, the village stirs before the sun clears the ridges. Smoke curls upward, llamas shuffle and grunt, and you're handed a small woven pouch. Inside, crisp green leaves, edges curled, as though they've been waiting centuries, just for you. The villagers nod for you to take one, and so you slip it onto your tongue, chewing slowly. The bitterness is sharp, earthy, like grass mixed with copper. Your gums tingle, your tongue numbs, and suddenly the thin air that pressed on your lungs last night loosens its grip. You've just tasted the coca leaf, the quiet backbone of Andean survival. For millennia, this plant has been both blessing and controversy healer, and outlaw, sacred companion, and global scandal. But right now, for you, it's simply relief. Your heartbeat steadies, your legs feel a little lighter, and the mountain trail looks just a bit less impossible. The Quechua and Aymara people have chewed coca for generations. They call it the divine leaf of immortality, though you quickly note immortality isn't on tonight's menu. Still, coca was central to empire runners, covering vast distances, could keep going on little more than coca and water. Miners descending into the belly of Potosi gnawed it to dull hunger and exhaustion. Mothers brewed it to ease the aches of childbirth. A mainstream historical fact slides in here. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they were horrified by coca, at first calling it a tool of the devil. But then watching miners chew it to work longer and harder, the colonizers quickly changed their tune. Suddenly coca wasn't witchcraft, it was profit. The Spanish crown even taxed coca leaves, making them part of imperial revenue. And here's the quirky tidbit. Coca was often carried in little pouches alongside a gourd filled with powdered lime, the mineral, not the citrus. Chewers would dip a stick into the lime, tap it against the leaves in their mouths, and feel the alkaloids release faster. Imagine it like an ancient version of activating your snack with a sprinkle of science. It wasn't exactly Doritos with ranch dip, but close enough. Historians still argue whether coca use was primarily medicinal or spiritual. For the Inca, the line didn't exist. Every offering to the gods included coca leaves. Every ritual, marriages, burials, planting seasons, saw handfuls scattered onto the earth, as if the mountains themselves needed their daily chew. So was it medicine, or was it prayer? The debate continues. As you chew, the villagers show you how to read the leaves like omens. If a leaf folds cleanly when held by its stem, it's good luck. If it tears awkwardly, well, maybe you should watch your step on those cliffs today. Superstition or not, you suddenly find yourself hoping for a neat fold. The coca leaf isn't just about energy, it was, and still is, woven into social bonds. Sharing a pouch of leaves is like passing around a pot of coffee at the office or clinking glasses at a bar. It's both medicinal and communal, a reason to pause, chat, and strengthen ties. You notice how villagers never chew alone. They huddle together, smiling with green-tinted teeth, trading gossip about crops and weather. The Spaniards, of course, took coca in directions the villagers never intended. Centuries later, chemists in Europe isolated its active alkaloid cocaine. Suddenly, this humble leaf became the centerpiece of everything, from numbing dental surgeries to, yes, early recipes of Coca-Cola. You chew gently, wondering if you've just sipped the world's strangest soda through time. But back here in the mountains, before all the scandals and headlines, coca was simply survival. A runner darts past the village, now his legs pumping like pistons, and you realize he's fueled by nothing more than these leaves. Imagine carrying imperial messages from Cusco to Quito, with no breaks, no energy bars, just a wad of green in your cheek. You feel tired just watching him. Another elder hands you coca tea, warm, fragrant, slightly milder than chewing the raw leaf. It tastes like earth, steeped in sunlight. As you sip, you notice your head feels clearer, less fogged by altitude. This is why coca is still offered to tourists climbing Machu Picchu today, though usually without the full cultural weight it carries here by the fire. You're reminded that plants are never just plants. They're stories, arguments, battles of meaning. To one world, coca is sacred. To another, it's a controlled substance. But in this village it's neither scandal nor headline. It's daily bread for the lungs, a companion leaf folded gently between fingers and lips. The sun climbs, the air warms slightly, and you tuck the pouch into your belt. You know this is only the first of many roots and leaves that will guide you. If coca taught you to breathe, the next herb will whisper promises of strength and vitality, though maybe with a sly wink. Your teeth are still faintly numb from the coca leaves when a young man in the village gestures for you to follow him up the slope. His steps are sure-footed, almost teasing you stumble over loose stones while he hops from rock to rock like a mountain goat. He leads you to a patch of earth that looks unremarkable at first, just a scattering of hardy grass and weeds. But then he kneels, digs with his hands, and reveals a bulbous root, knobby and pale against the soil. "This is maca," he explains with a grin. "You've heard whispers already how the Andean highlands hide a root said to give strength, stamina, and fertility. You pick up the bulb, its rough light in your palm, with a faint smell that's both earthy and sweet. For centuries, families in these mountains have eaten it roasted, boiled, or ground into flour. Soldiers, it's said, consumed it before battles, hoping for endurance. Couples seeking children chewed it as well, hoping for, well, let's say, endurance of a different sort. A mainstream historical fact, maca has been cultivated in the high Andes for over 2,000 years, thriving at altitudes where few other crops survive. When potatoes faltered, when quinoa struggled, maca clung to the soil, a resilient survivor in climates too harsh for almost anything else. In many ways, it was the food of last resort, but also paradoxically, a food of vitality. The quirky tidbit Spanish chroniclers noted that after their horses were brought to the Andes, the animals struggled to reproduce. Locals advised feeding them maca. Supposedly the horses regained vigor, and suddenly everyone, colonists and natives alike, was convinced maca was some kind of miracle libido booster. Imagine being a conquistador. Writing home gold is fine, but let me tell you about this potato that makes your horses frisky. Historians still argue whether maca's legendary effects are more myth than science. Modern studies suggest it has nutrients and compounds that might support energy, but the tales of superhuman strength or endless fertility may be more cultural storytelling than biochemical truth. Still, belief is powerful, and belief alone can turn a simple root into a sacred offering. You're offered a small bowl of toasted maca flour mixed with water, a thick, nutty porridge. The flavor is mild, almost malty, a cousin to oatmeal, but with a bitter edge. It slides warmly into your stomach, and you do feel, if not immortal, at least less wobbly in your legs. Your guide chuckles, nudges you, and says something you can't quite translate, but you catch the laughter from the others. Apparently you've just eaten a fertility snack. You pretend not to blush in the firelight. The villagers treat maca not only as food, but as medicine. Mothers give it to children for strength during growth. Elders use it to maintain health through cold winters. Ritual offerings include maca placed beside coca leaves, one for the body's breath, the other for its vigor. You sense that for these people, survival isn't just about enduring, it's about thriving, about carrying vitality into every part of life. Another layer of memory drifts in you. Recall that the Inca elite once restricted maca fields, reserving the best harvests for nobility and warriors. Imagine the politics of food becoming the politics of power. Who gets the maca, who gets left with just potatoes? Each harvest carried weight far beyond nutrition. The night grows colder, stars sharpening above. You sit with the root in your hand, reflecting on how something so humble, a knob of earth pulled from rocky soil, could shape reputation, desire, and myth. Today, maca powders fill shelves in wellness shops worldwide, sold in smoothie-ready bags with flashy labels promising natural energy. Yet here in the Andes, maca is just breakfast, lunch, or medicine for a tired child. You chew thoughtfully, wondering whether you feel stronger or whether you're just part of the same centuries-old story, the one where humans pin hopes on a plant to carry them farther than their bodies alone can go. The fire crackles, laughter echoes, and you tuck the last bite of maca into your mouth. Ahead, another gift waits, one far more bitter, but far more world-shaping, the bark of a tree that once changed the fate of fevers across the globe. Your fingers still smell faintly of roasted maca when an elder beckons you to follow him down a slope shaded by tall, narrow trees. Their trunks rise pale and straight leaves quivering in the highland breeze. He stops at one, places a weathered hand against the bark and gestures for you to listen. Of course, the tree doesn't speak, but you realize he means listen to its story. This is the cinchona tree, and its bark once carried a secret that reshaped medicine not only in the Andes but across the world. You run your hand over the trunk. It's rough, almost dusty, and when the elder chips a piece away, the exposed wood releases a sharp, bitter smell. He hands you a sliver, and when you place it on your tongue, your mouth floods with bitterness so intense you nearly gag. It's as though the tree itself is trying to warn you off. But here's the irony inside that bitterness lies salvation. For centuries, Andean healers brewed cinchona bark into a tea to treat fevers. Spanish chroniclers described how indigenous people called it a fever tree. Later, European doctors discovered that the bark contained quinine, the first effective treatment for malaria. A simple tree from these mountains would become the weapon that allowed empires to expand into tropical zones that had once been death traps. That's your mainstream historical fact. Without cinchona, European colonial projects in Africa and Asia might have faltered much earlier. Malaria was the great empire slayer, and quinine became the empire saver. Now for the quirky tidbit, cinchona bark was so bitter that colonists started mixing it with sugar lime and naturally alcohol. Over time, this tonic water became not just medicine, but recreation. Yes, every gin and tonic you see at a bar today is a faint echo of an Andean remedy boiled on smoky fires centuries ago. Next time you sip one, remember, you're basically drinking history with ice cubes. Historians still argue about the origin story of cinchona's discovery. One tale claims a Spanish countess in Lima was cured of a fever with the bark in the 1630s, and in gratitude, the tree was named after her family. Others suggest that story was a later invention, a way of giving European nobility credit for indigenous wisdom. The truth, murky as ever. What's certain is that long before any countess sipped her brew, Quechua and other highland people were already using the bark. The elder shows you how it's prepared: strips of bark shaved off, dried, then boiled into a dark, bitter tea. He offers you a cup, and though your lips curl at the taste, you sense the power in it. This isn't comfort tea, this is medicine meant to push back against death. You imagine feverish bodies, cooled shivers, stilled lives pulled back from the edge by this bitter potion. You also see the shadow side. Once the Spanish learned of cinchona, they began harvesting it heavily, exporting bales of bark across oceans. Some regions were stripped nearly bare. Later, when European empires realized how essential quinine was, they smuggled seeds to Asia and Africa, planting cinchona in colonial plantations. The Andes lost not only their monopoly but part of their heritage. Still here in the highlands, the tree remains more than a commodity. It's part of ritual offerings, part of local healing, part of everyday life. A child with chills, a grandmother with fever, a traveler with shivers, all are handed this dark, bitter tea. And while the world remembers cinchona for saving armies, the villagers remember it for saving families. As the night deepens, you sit beneath the trees, the taste still lingering in your mouth, sharper than coffee, harsher than any medicine you've known. The stars above glitter like scattered quinine crystals, and you wonder how many lives have been tied to this bark, how many stories hidden in its bitterness. Your guide rises motions for you to move on. Ahead lies another plant, one that clings close to the ground, glowing almost like moss in the moonlight. It promises not bitterness, but resin sticky and sweet, said to soothe weary lungs. The path winds higher into land where the air seems made of glass, so thin, so brittle, you almost expect it to crack with every breath. Here, vegetation grows low and close to the earth, as if afraid of the wind. You spot odd mounds across the rocky slopes. At first they look like green boulders, smooth and rounded, but as you draw closer, you realize they're alive, dense, cushiony, almost glowing in the moonlight. This is Yareta. To the untrained eye, it looks like moss. In truth, it's a flowering plant, though its blossoms are so tiny, you might miss them. What makes Yareta extraordinary is its age. These mounds grow so slowly, barely a centimeter a year, that some of the clumps you're touching tonight could be over 3,000 years old. Imagine crouching beside a plant that sprouted before Rome was an empire before the pyramids had lost their gleam. The elder who guides you presses a thumb against the sticky resin seeping between the tight-packed leaves. He rubs it between his fingers, then onto your palm. It clings like honey, faintly fragrant, carrying the scent of pine and resinous wood. For generations, Andean healers have used this substance to soothe chest ailments, coughs, bronchitis, the raspy breath of highland winters. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Early European explorers wrote that Yareta resin was burned in place of scarce firewood at these altitudes. The plant is so dense, so filled with flammable oils, that it became an essential heat source for travelers. Imagine gathering around a smoldering mound that took centuries to grow just to keep warm for one cold night. And the quirky tidbit. Some locals whispered that Yareta could cure lungs that forgot how to breathe. In other words, if you were so sick you couldn't draw breath, a resin poultice might coax the lungs awake. You doubt it could revive the dead, but the description lingers. Lungs. Forgetting how to breathe feels almost like poetry. Historians still argue whether Yareta's medicinal use was widespread or more symbolic. Was it truly a frontline remedy, or was it revered more as an ancient being, a kind of plant elder that people approached carefully? The debate remains, partly because written records are sparse and oral traditions fade like smoke on these slopes. You crouch beside the mound, running your hand over its springy surface. It's strangely comforting, like resting your palm on a sleeping giant's shoulder. The plant is cold to the touch, yet alive in a way rocks will never be. You can't help but feel a pang of guilt knowing that for centuries people hacked chunks away for firewood. Each scar would have taken centuries to heal, if at all. The villagers show you how they collect resin in tiny amounts, never too much, always leaving the plant alive. They warm it, gently mix it with water, and spoon it to those coughing through the night. You sip a little. The taste is sharp, resinous, but not unpleasant. It coats your throat like an herbal lozenge, lingering long after you swallow. Around the fire, stories emerge how Yareta plants are said to hold the memory of the mountains themselves. To harm one recklessly is to anger the earth. To treat one with respect is to borrow its patience, its slow endurance. You imagine carrying some of that patience in your own chest, each breath stretching a little easier. The night wind roars across the slope, but you feel anchored beside the ancient green mound. In its silence, you sense a wisdom deeper than words. It's not just medicine, not just fuel, but a reminder that survival in the Andes is never rushed. It's slow, steady, centuries in the making. As the firelight dims, your guide nudges you onward. The next herb doesn't cling to the earth, but dances on breezes sharp and minty, ready to soothe the belly as much as the lungs. You leave the ancient green mounds behind, their resin still coating your throat with that faint, piney tang. The path narrows into a canyon where night air whistles like a flute between stone walls. Somewhere ahead, the scent of something sharper cuts through the chill, fresh, almost peppery. You follow it until a cluster of small, hardy plants appears, their tiny leaves trembling in the breeze. This is Munya, the Andean mint. At first glance, it looks modest: thin stems, delicate leaves, small flowers that blush faintly purple in the moonlight. But crush one between your fingers, and the scent bursts free, cool and invigorating, as if the mountains themselves have brewed you a mint tea. The villagers pluck handfuls of leaves and drop them into steaming clay cups. You wrap your hands around one, letting the warmth seep into your skin before taking a sip. The flavor is sharp, bright, almost spicy, with a lingering sweetness at the back of your throat. It's like peppermint's rugged cousin, a little wilder, a little less polished, but somehow more grounding in this thin air. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Munya has been used in the Andes for centuries to ease digestive troubles, treat colds, and even act as a natural antiseptic. Spanish colonial records mention it as a mountain mint, often prescribed for stomach pain after long journeys across uneven terrain. Travelers apparently suffered from more than sore feet. Now the quirky tidbit munya leaves were sometimes stuffed into woolen garments or llama packs to keep fleas and lice away. Imagine smelling fresh and pest-free on a week-long trek through the mountains. Not glamorous, but effective. And hey, you thought mothballs in closets were strange. Historians still argue whether munya had more cultural weight as a healing plant or as a household helper. Was it valued more for its medical properties or its ability to keep pests out of food stores? The answer is probably both, since Andean life rarely separated health from daily survival. As you sip, you notice your stomach loosening the heaviness from too much roasted maize and maca porridge easing. You realize that in a world without Pepto-Bismol or ginger ale, munya tea was the faithful companion of travelers' shepherds and anyone who overindulged at a festival. Around the fire, elders tell you munya is also considered a heart warmer. Couples sip it together on cold nights, and mothers brew it for their children when the wind howls outside. You take another drink, imagining families centuries ago doing exactly the same, steam curling from their cups as stars wheeled above. The air grows colder, frost creeping across the ground. Someone tosses a bundle of munya into the fire, and the smoke carries its sharp fragrance into the night. It fills your nose, clears your head, makes the darkness seem less heavy. You understand why healers burned it in huts of the sick. It wasn't just medicine, but atmosphere transforming illness into something a little more bearable. You remember with a smile how modern tourists are still handed munya tea in Cusco after long hikes. They drink it without knowing they're part of a tradition centuries deep. The leaf connects past to present villagers, to wanderers, sacred ritual, to everyday stomach aches. As the last of the tea warms your belly, you lean back, listening to the soft crackle of firewood mixed with munya smoke. Beyond the canyon, the trail climbs toward higher ground, where vines twist through the forest edges, clawing upward as though reaching for the stars. The next plant waits for you there, curling like a feline's paw, promising strength against sickness, claws out against inflammation. Your stomach still hums with the warmth of munya tea, as dawn spills pale light over the ridges. The trail now dips into a patch of forest, where the air grows damper, the soil richer, and vines tangle like sleeping snakes between the trees. You pause, brushing past a curling stem, and notice something unusual. The vine bears sharp hooked thorns like claws, reaching out to snag you. This is Uña de Gato, cat's claw. The name feels apt. The plant seems almost alive, gripping and climbing, refusing to let go. Locals tell you the vine is more than a nuisance. It's a defender, a medicine said to sharpen immunity and claw away at the aches of inflammation. A healer cuts a section of vine and slices it open, revealing a pale, fibrous interior. He places a few shavings into boiling water, and soon you're handed a cup of cat's claw tea. The flavor is earthy, slightly bitter, with a woody undertone that lingers on your tongue. It isn't delicious, but then again, most medicines worth their salt rarely are. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Uña de Gato has been used for centuries in Peru and neighboring regions to treat arthritis, stomach ulcers, and even infections. In the 20th century, researchers became fascinated with its potential, and to this day, supplements made from the vine are sold in health shops worldwide, promising immune support. The quirky tidbit. Some villagers believed that drinking cat's claw made your body as strong and flexible as a puma, the sacred mountain predator. You can almost imagine ancient warriors sipping it before hunts, hoping to leap and strike with feline grace. Whether true or not, the idea of channeling jungle cats from a teacup makes you smirk. Historians still argue whether Uña de Gato was considered primarily a spiritual protector or a physical healer. The thorny vine, after all, looks defensive, as though nature herself shaped it to ward off evil. Was it valued more for its symbolism, the claws of a cat tearing at illness, or for actual chemical compounds hidden in its bark? The villagers speak of both. They burn the vine's shavings in ceremonies meant to scratch away curses. They also brew it for the elderly whose joints stiffen in the mountain cold. To them, the line between superstition and science doesn't exist. Both are part of the same vine twisting toward the sky. You sip, slowly feeling the warmth spread through your chest and limbs. Maybe it's suggestion, maybe it's real, but you sense your body relaxing, joints a little looser. It's easy to see why this vine has persisted not just in Andean medicine, but in modern laboratories. The forest around you seems to hum with the life of its vines, stretching like veins between the trees. As you stand, your hand brushes another vine and you feel its hooked claw snag your sleeve. It resists letting go, just like illness does. You untangle yourself carefully, oddly grateful for the metaphor. Medicine isn't always about sweetness or comfort. Sometimes it's about gripping hard, digging in, and not releasing until the sickness weakens. The villagers coil dried sections of uña de gato to carry back to the village. It's a traveling companion, a portable shield. As you watch them pack the bundles, you realize that every plant you've encountered so far, cocamaca, cinchona, yareta, muña, and now cat's claw, forms part of a living arsenal. The air grows heavier here in the forest, damp with mist and scent of wood, but soon you'll leave the vines behind and climb again, up into thinner air. Waiting there is a root tangled in the soil, one said to soothe minds and lull restless bodies, a natural lullaby whispered by the mountains themselves. Mist curls between the trees as you climb higher, leaving the thorny embrace of cat's claw behind. The air thins again, sharp in your lungs, and the path opens onto slopes where small, wiry plants cling to the soil like secrets. Your guide kneels, brushes aside loose earth, and reveals a nest of tangled roots. They're pale knotted and carry a faint, earthy aroma, almost sweet, almost musky. This is valeriana, the Andean cousin of valerian root. Where coca keeps you awake and maca stirs your strength, valeriana does the opposite. It hushes you. For centuries, villagers have boiled these roots into teas for the sleepless, the anxious, or those whose minds wander restlessly through long mountain nights. The healer breaks a piece of root and hands it to you. The smell is stronger now, pungent, grounding like damp soil after rain. You sip from the cup he offers, and the flavor matches the scent, earthy, a little bitter, but oddly comforting. Slowly, you feel your shoulders drop, your breath ease. The Andes may roar with wind outside, but in your chest, something quiets. Here's your mainstream historical fact: valerian has been used as a sedative since antiquity, even in Europe, where Greek and Roman physicians praised it for calming nerves and easing insomnia. In the Andes, its native counterpart was folded into the same role, soothing sleepless children and weary herders who spent nights guarding flocks. The quirky tidbit: some villagers believed valeriana could chase away nightmares by tricking the dream spirits. A root placed under the pillow, they said, would confuse the wandering phantoms, making them trip on the tangled fibers before they reached your mind. You imagine dream spirits stumbling like clumsy burglars and can't help but grin. Historians still argue whether valeriana was seen more as a true sedative or as a ritual protector. Was the calmness in the tea's chemistry or in the belief that spirits were kept at bay? The truth probably lies in both, as it often does in these mountains. You picture shepherds sipping valeriana tea under the stars, keeping one eye on their llamas, another on the constellations that guided planting and harvest. You imagine mothers rocking children, whispering lullabies with cups of the root-infused brew, cooling on the hearth. Every culture has its bedtime stories. Here the story is brewed from the soil itself. You finish your cup, the warmth spreading like a slow tide. Your eyelids feel heavier, though you're not yet ready to surrender to sleep. The villagers chuckle, they've seen this many times before. Valeriana doesn't knock you out. It just softens the edges of the world until sleep feels less like a battle and more like an invitation. As you sit, you realize how perfectly this plant fits into the Andean balance. Coca wakes you, maca fuels you, cinchona fights fever, muña soothes your stomach, uña de gato defends you, and valeriana reminds you to rest. Survival isn't just about running faster or climbing higher. It's about stopping breathing, letting the body recover so you can rise again tomorrow. The fire crackles lower now, the night deep around you. Somewhere an owl calls its voice carrying across the slopes. You glance at the roots in your hand, twisted and tangled like nerves knotted in the dark. Maybe that's the secret of Valeriana. It teaches you to unknot, to loosen, to let go. But the journey isn't finished. Beyond these slopes lie even higher ridges where the air thins to razor edges. There are plant weights that travelers swear can fend off the mountain's greatest challenge, the sickness that grips when oxygen abandons you. The slopes grow steeper, the air thinner, and every step feels heavier than the last. Your breath shortens chest tight as though the mountains have wrapped invisible hands around your ribs. This is altitude sickness, creeping in, an old enemy of travelers who dare to climb too high too fast. But the locals, with centuries of wisdom tucked into their satchels, already have a remedy waiting. From one of these satchels, a healer pulls a bundle of dried yellow-green leaves. They look humble, but when he crushes them between his palms, the scent rises sharp and resinous, like pine mixed with citrus. He drops the leaves into hot water, and soon you're sipping another bitter, earthy tea. This plant is chachacoma, the mountain's antidote to thin air. The tea tastes strong, almost medicinal, with a bite that clings to your tongue. It's not pleasant, but within minutes you feel your chest ease slightly. The pounding in your temples lessens, the fog lifts just enough for your thoughts to stretch out again. It's as though the mountain has loosened its grip. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Chachacoma has long been used in the Andes as a treatment for soroche, altitude sickness. Travelers and herders alike carried it to prevent dizziness, headaches, and fatigue. Even in modern times, mountaineers in South America have turned to it when climbing peaks where oxygen thins to a whisper. Now for the quirky tidbit, villagers sometimes stuffed chachacoma under their hats or tucked sprigs into their clothing during journeys. The belief was that even the smell alone could ward off altitude's grasp. Imagine wandering the Andes with a head full of herbs, not exactly a fashion statement, but certainly practical. Historians still argue whether the plant's effectiveness is chemical or psychological. Some studies hint at compounds that might aid circulation, while others suggest its power lies mostly in belief. Was the relief real, or a placebo wrapped in tradition? Either way, when you're gasping on a cold ridge, belief feels like a kind of oxygen. Around the fire, stories swirl of shepherds who claimed chachacoma kept them awake and strong on long nights. Others swore it sharpened their vision when scanning slopes for lost llamas. You can't help but imagine a kind of mountain super tea, the ancient Andean version of an energy drink, minus the neon cans and questionable side effects. As you sip, the bitterness lingers, but so does a sense of resilience. You think of countless travelers before you sipping the same brew, waiting for the mountain's invisible hands to unclench. The continuity feels comforting, like stepping into a river that's been flowing for centuries. The night grows colder, and the stars above seem sharper, closer, almost metallic in their brilliance. You realize the Andes have always demanded both respect and adaptation, and chachacoma is one of many quiet tools humans devised to bargain with altitude. You lean back, listening to the wind whistle across the ridge. Your head feels clearer now, your breath steadier. The worst of the sickness slips away, replaced by a calm awareness of how precarious life is up here. And just as you settle into this relief, the healer speaks of another plant, one not for sickness of the body, but for wounds of the spirit. It's said to protect the heart, to guard against shadows within as much as dangers without. The ridge you've been resting on feels steadier now, your lungs no longer clawing for air. The tea of chachacoma has done its quiet work, and you're ready to follow the path once more. The trail winds into a sheltered valley where the soil is dark and rich, watered by a thin stream that glimmers under the moon. Here, scattered among grasses and stones, grows another plant humble in stature, but with a reputation larger than the mountains themselves. Your guide bends to pluck a sprig. The leaves are small, glossy, and give off a subtle fragrance when rubbed between the fingers. This is Pico, sometimes called epazote, though the locals know it by many names. The villagers smile as they brew it into a tea, telling you it's not only for stomach troubles, but also for matters of the heart, not in the romantic sense, but in the emotional one. Pico, they say, calms both body and spirit, stitching a weary traveller back together from the inside out. You sip the tea and the taste is sharp, resinous, with a peculiar afternote, something like gasoline diluted into a green leaf. Not exactly comforting, but somehow grounding. Your stomach feels soothed, and an unexpected calm begins to settle in your chest. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Pico has been used in the Andes for centuries as a digestive aid and a treatment for intestinal parasites. Spanish chroniclers noted it as a common cure, one villagers administered after large communal meals. Beyond the gut, though, it was also brewed for anxiety, melancholy, and what we'd now call the blues. The quirky tidbit Pico was sometimes burned in small bundles like incense. Its smoke waved around the head of a troubled person to sweep away sadness. You can almost picture it, someone sitting in a smoky hut, half choking, half laughing, wondering if the sadness or the smoke will drive them out first. Still, there's something oddly comforting about being cocooned in fragrant leaves. Historians still argue whether Pico's role in Andean life was more medicinal or more ceremonial. Was it primarily a parasite purge or a spiritual cleanser? Some suggest its power lay in bridging the two, a plant that recognized how tightly the stomach and the soul are linked. The villagers share stories of nights when Pico tea helped grieving families rest, or of travelers who sipped it before journeys to ease the unease in their hearts. You realize that in a landscape as harsh as the Andes, emotional survival was as important as physical health. Plants like Pico weren't just about keeping the body alive, they were about keeping the spirit from shattering. You hold your cup a little longer, letting the warmth seep into your palms. The tea may not taste like comfort food, but it carries a kind of reassurance all the same. It reminds you that ancient people understood something we often forget. Healing isn't only about killing bacteria or easing pain. Sometimes it's about restoring balance, about giving the heart a thread to hold on to in the dark. The valley air grows colder dew, settling on the grasses, and the stream beside you murmurs quietly. You stand, leaving the last of the Pico tea to steam into the night. Ahead, the trail rises once more, leading toward fields where shepherds once gathered wild blossoms believed to chase away not only fevers, but curses. Their petals brightened highland meadows, their fragrance a defense against shadows you couldn't see. The path leads upward again, the valley giving way to open meadows painted silver by moonlight. Here the air feels lighter, touched with a faint floral note. At first you think it's the wind carrying perfume from some distant garden, but then you notice clusters of small, bright flowers scattered among the grasses. Their petals glow faintly pale, swaying like tiny lanterns in the dark. Your guide bends to gather a handful. These are manzanilla blossoms, chamomile, though in the Andes they've taken on their own character. The flowers are simple daisy-like, but their power has stretched across continents. In the highlands they are medicine for fevers, calm for restless hearts, and whisper it softly, a charm against curses. A pot is set on the fire, and soon the air fills with a fragrance you already know, sweet apple-like, soothing, in a way that bypasses thought and goes straight to memory. You sip the tea golden in the cup, and it tastes delicate, smooth with that faint, honeyed undertone. Unlike the bitterness of chachacoma or the earthy depth of valeriana, this feels like comfort distilled. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Chamomile has been one of the world's most widely used medicinal herbs since antiquity. In the Andes, its local varieties were adopted into daily life by indigenous peoples, especially after Spanish colonists brought more seeds and expanded its use. It was brewed for fevers, digestive troubles, and restlessness. Now for the quirky tidbit. Some villagers tied bundles of chamomile above their doors to keep away envy. Not evil spirits this time, envy. Apparently nothing curdled faster than jealousy in a small village, and a little daisy-like charm was thought to keep it out. Imagine explaining that to your modern neighbor. while hanging flowers over your apartment door. Historians still argue whether chamomile in the Andes was more valued as an imported European staple or as a plant that was quickly woven into indigenous traditions. Did its roots here grow from colonial influence, or did it find resonance because Andean cultures already believed in floral protectors? As you drink, you notice how quickly the tension in your body seems to unravel. Chamomile doesn't just soothe, it persuades. You remember the shepherds who, after long days, sat with mugs of manzanilla, their laughter soft, their burdens lighter. You picture mothers steeping it for feverish children, their voices low as they hummed lullabies. The villagers tell you of another use, sprinkling chamomile water over livestock to keep them healthy and free from envy's bad luck. You'd smile at the image of llamas blessed with floral baths, their wool glistening under the sun. It may sound quaint, but to those who depended on every animal for survival, a little extra luck was worth a handful of blossoms. You sip again, slower this time. The warmth spreads, the flavor lingers, and the meadow around you feels softer, more forgiving. Chamomile is the opposite of the harsh vines, bitter roots, and resinous leaves you've tasted before. Its gentleness in a cup proof that not all medicine has to taste like punishment. As the night stretches on, the fire dwindles. The blossoms in your cup drift lazily, their golden color glowing faintly in the low light. You realize chamomile isn't just a cure for fevers, it's a ritual of comfort, a thread connecting restless nights across centuries. But beyond this meadow, higher still, there waits another plant, with blossoms not golden, but white, used not to calm, but to fight. It was gathered when illness struck whole villages, brewed to battle the invisible plagues that crept through Andean communities. Its name lingers in whispers, sharp and a little frightening, like the sickness it was meant to hold at bay. The meadow fades behind you as the trail climbs again, narrowing into rocky slopes where the wind keens like a flute. The air grows sharper and you sense the shift even before you see the next plant. Nestled in cracks between boulders, pale clusters of flowers catch the moonlight white with a ghostly shimmer, as though they belong as much to dreams as to soil. Your guide crouches and points. This is Marco, sometimes called wild sage of the Andes. Its fragrance is strong, sharp, almost medicinal, even before the leaves are crushed. When brewed, it becomes a fierce companion against sickness, the kind of remedy villagers turn to when fevers spread through entire households. The healer drops a few leaves into boiling water. The steam rises in a cloud so potent it makes your eyes water before you even sip. When you finally taste it, the flavor is pungent, bitter, resinous, like sage mixed with pine needles. It clings to your throat, warming from the inside out, leaving a faint, tingling trail down your chest. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Marco was widely used in Andean medicine to treat fevers, respiratory infections, and even malaria-like illnesses. Spanish colonists recorded its use during outbreaks, noting how villagers brewed strong decoctions and inhaled the vapors to clear lungs and sweat out fevers. The quirky tidbit: Marco was also burned in large bundles during community cleansings. The smoke was thought to chase away not just sickness, but envy, gossip, and ill wishes that could spread just as destructively. Picture a whole village standing in a smoky plaza, coughing together, half healed by the plant, half annoyed by the sheer intensity of it. Historians still argue whether Marco's primary role was medicinal or ritual. Was it truly reducing fevers, or were the ceremonies of smoke and steam more about uniting people against invisible threats? When a sickness swept through a village, perhaps the healing wasn't only in the plant, but in the shared belief that no one faced it alone. As you sit with your cup, you imagine generations huddled in stone huts, smoke curling against the rafters, families gathered around a simmering pot of Marco. They inhaled its pungent scent, sipped its bitterness, and hoped the illness would loosen its grip. You feel the echo of that fear, how fragile life could be in these mountains, how a cough or a fever could ripple through a whole community. The villagers share another story. Marco leaves were sometimes tied into little bundles and tucked into children's clothing as protective amulets. Not exactly a comfortable fashion accessory, but better than being at the mercy of spirits or plagues. You can almost picture toddlers waddling around with leafy charms sewn into their tunics, warded against both germs and gossip. You finish your cup slowly, the bitterness lingering like a stern lecture. Marco doesn't soothe like chamomile or invigorate like coca, it challenges you. It's the mountain's version of tough love, unpleasant on the tongue, but maybe exactly what you need. The wind rises, scattering the last petals across the rocks. The healer gathers more sprigs, wrapping them carefully, for sickness always returns, and Marco is a plant you never want to be without. Ahead, the trail dips toward a region where the earth glows strangely in the firelight, and the air carries a mineral tang. There, hidden in volcanic soils, grows another remedy, one meant not for fever or sadness, but for wounds. You can see the cuts and sores of everyday survival in a rugged land. The path bends downward now, the rocky slopes giving way to volcanic soil that smells faintly of iron and ash. The ground here feels warmer underfoot, as if the earth itself is still exhaling from ancient eruptions. Scattered among the dark soil, small shrubs rise with silvery green leaves, thick and resinous to the touch. When one is crushed, a sticky sap oozes out, carrying a sharp, almost medicinal scent. This is sangre de grado, dragon's blood. Despite the dramatic name, it's not from a beast, but from the tree-like plants of the high Andes and Amazon fringes. Cut into the bark, and a deep red latex bleeds out, startling in its resemblance to blood. Villagers collect this resin, and with it they treat wounds, cuts, burns, and even ulcers inside the body. A healer demonstrates by nicking the bark, letting the crimson sap drip into a small wooden bowl. The liquid gleams dark red in the firelight, thick and glossy, as though the tree itself has veins. He dips a finger into it and spreads it across his skin, where it dries quickly into a thin, protective film. It looks like a natural bandage, and suddenly the plant's dramatic name feels justified. Here's your mainstream historical fact: sangre de grado has been used for centuries as a topical healer. Spanish chroniclers noted how quickly villagers applied it to wounds, praising its ability to seal skin and prevent infection. Even today, modern studies explore its antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties, confirming that tradition had it right all along. The quirky tidbit: some villagers once painted small streaks of the red resin onto their cheeks before ceremonies, believing it made them look fierce and protected. Imagine showing up to a ritual with a natural war paint mask, equal parts medicine and intimidation. If nothing else, it proves humans will always find creative ways to mix practicality with style. Historians still argue whether sangre de grado was first valued more as a medicine or as a ritual substance. Its blood-like appearance lent itself easily to symbolism, life, vitality, protection. Was its fame born from the way it looked or from the way it worked? The debate remains, but perhaps the truth is, both its power was in its drama as much as in its chemistry. As you touch the resin still tacky against your skin, you imagine shepherds and hunters centuries ago relying on it after cuts from stone, thorn, or animal bite. You picture mothers dabbing it onto their children's scraped knees, the red streak drying into a second skin. In a world without antiseptic sprays or bandages, sangre de grado was a portable pharmacy carried in small gourds tied at the belt. The healer passes you a small cup with diluted resin inside. You sip cautiously, and the flavor is bitter, resinous, like drinking wood varnish laced with earth. It's not exactly a treat, but you're told it eases ulcers and stomach pains, coating the lining like it coats the skin. You grimace but then chuckle. Sometimes healing is about enduring unpleasantness with a little humor. After all, you probably won't survive this if you expect every cure to taste like honey. The night deepens, and the glow of the resin in the firelight makes it seem alive, pulsing like a heart. You watch the healer seal the bark, cut with clay, a gesture of respect for the tree that bled for your medicine. You realize every plant here demands gratitude as well as use. But your journey isn't quite over. Beyond this volcanic ground lies one final ascent toward the highest, coldest reaches of the Andes, where a plant hides that seems almost impossible, a cactus growing where almost nothing else survives. Its spines hold both danger and healing its flesh, bridging the sacred and the medicinal. The volcanic earth fades into pale scree and bare stone as you make the final climb. The air is thin, biting each breath a deliberate act, and yet, improbably, life still clings here. Against the rock silhouetted by starlight stands a tall, columnar cactus. Its ribs rise in green ridges crowned with white tufts and long, gleaming spines. It looks both defiant and fragile, a sentinel on the edge of the sky. This is San Pedro cactus, known to the Quechua as huachuma. Its role in Andean medicine is layered, tangled between healing of the body and visions of the spirit. For centuries, villagers and shamans brewed its flesh into a thick, bitter drink, one used not for daily ailments, but for deeper wounds, questions of sickness that seem to live in both body and soul. A healer carefully slices a section of the cactus, peeling back the outer layer to reveal a pale, watery flesh. He sets it to simmer, and soon the air carries a sharp, vegetal smell like boiled cucumber mixed with rain-soaked earth. When the liquid is poured into a cup, it glows faintly green in the firelight. You raise it to your lips and the taste is intense, bitter, thick, with a resinous quality that coats your tongue. It is not meant to be enjoyed. It is meant to be endured, to be entered into like a trial. Here's your mainstream historical fact. San Pedro has been used in Andean traditions for thousands of years, with archaeological evidence of ritual use dating back to at least 1000 BCE. It was central to healing ceremonies where shamans guided participants through visions that were believed to reveal causes of illness and paths to wellness. The quirky tidbit. In some villages, the cactus was nicknamed the telephone to the gods. Locals joked half seriously that it connected you directly to mountain spirits, no need for an appointment. Imagine dialing up a divine customer service line, cactus in hand, asking why your joints ache or your crops failed. Historians still argue whether San Pedro's role was primarily medicinal, spiritual, or a combination of the two. Was it a psychoactive tool used solely for ritual, or was it genuinely viewed as medicine for physical ailments? The lines blur as they so often do in the Andes, where health and spirit are woven into a single fabric. As you sip, the world feels different edges, softer stars, brighter times stretching like pulled wool. You sense why generations sought this plant not for headaches or cuts, but for deeper reckonings, grief, fear, despair. Huachuma wasn't just a cure, it was an invitation to reimagine suffering, to see the threads beneath the surface of illness. The villagers murmur prayers as the fire crackles low. The cactus stands tall behind them, its spines glowing faintly silver under the moon. It feels less like a plant and more like a gatekeeper holding open the doorway between body and spirit, between the frail human heart and the vastness of the mountain night. You lean back, breath slow, eyelids heavy. The plants of the Andes drift through your memory: cocamaca, chinchona, yareta, muña uña de gato, valeriana, chachacoma, paico manzanilla, marco sangre de grado, and now huachuma. Each one a companion, a lesson, a fragment of survival, carved into leaf, root, or resin. And so the journey comes full circle, a long wandering through forgotten herbs that were never truly forgotten here, only waiting for you to notice them. The fire dims, the villagers' voices fade, and the mountains cradle you in silence. And now, as the last embers soften to ash, you let the night deepen around you. The Andes no longer feel sharp or harsh. They are simply vast, patient, steady, like an ancient blanket draped across your shoulders. Each plant you've met was a thread in that blanket, woven with care, with resilience, with memory. Your breath slows. The wind that once cut at your cheeks now feels gentler, like a whisper brushing past. Somewhere in the dark, llamas shift quietly, bells at their necks chiming like distant lullabies. The earth is firm beneath you, cool but reassuring, as though the mountain itself is holding you in place. The bitterness of herbs lingers faintly on your tongue, but even that feels soothing now, a reminder of journeys completed. Your body feels heavier, as if it is melting into the soil, as if the ground has been waiting all this time to carry your weight. Stars overhead gleam scattered like seeds across the velvet sky. Their light reaches you, softly filtered through centuries, steady and unhurried. You realize that the mountains, the herbs, the people, they have always moved at this pace. Slow, enduring, patient. And now, so do you. So let yourself drift. Let your thoughts grow quieter, softer, until they blur into the hum of the night. Each breath carries you deeper into rest. Each moment stretches into calm. The world shrinks to the warmth of your body, the rhythm of your breathing, the hush of silence wrapping around you like a cocoon. And here in this highland night, you are safe. You are steady. You are home.